This video is a demonstration of the Model 3 System Expander, or M3SE, which is a new add-on device for the vintage TRS-80 Model III, Model 4, 4D, and 4P microcomputers that were made by Radio Shack in the 1980s. As you can see, I've got a Model 3 set up here. To the right of it is a VGA monitor, which is showing a splash screen, which M3SE outputs when you first power it up. And to the left of the Model 3, you can see the M3SE itself. If you're at all familiar with the Model 1 System Expander device that's been around for a couple of years now, you'll notice that it looks very, very similar. And in fact, a lot of its features and functions are very similar as well. There are a few major differences though, and we'll go over those in this video. Here I've zoomed in on the Model 3 screen so you can see what's happening. Everything I demonstrate with the Model 3 will also apply to the Model 4 and 4D. The Model 4P is a little bit different, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But in any case, you'll receive with the M3SE an installation floppy. That's it. And as per the instructions on the M3SE website, it will tell you to make a backup of it and label it M3SE boot, which I have done. And I'll put that in the floppy drive. Turn on the TRS-80. Wait for it to restore to track 0, close the door, ask for the date, there it is. So the next thing you need to do is go through a setup script which will install drivers for the hard drives and the real-time clock calendar, and to do that you do set up. And we'll see that we need to hit enter to continue, break to abort, and enter. This will run 6 times a driver installer called M3SE init/cmd. Each run through installs a single hard drive. The first time it runs, it also installs the real-time clock calendar driver. And near the end, it will show us the new high memory utilization. You can see 3 drivers there. The first one is called M3SE. That is essentially an initialization driver for the other 2. Second one is RTCC, which obviously is the real-time clock calendar. Third one is IDE, which is for the hard drives. And then it shows you the hard drive configuration. You can see there's 6 of them. Each of them has a little bit over 10 megabytes. The last one's a little bit bigger to use all 1024 cylinders that LDOS can address. And that last one obviously is the floppy drive with the install disk in it. Actually now the boot disk after we do this, because it's going to do some final steps including saving the configuration to that floppy. It renames it to M3SE boot. And the process is complete. And to prove that it works, we can reboot. The next thing I'll do is run the auto exec script. Runs DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, to get an IP address for the M3SE. Runs SNTP, Simple Network Time Protocol, to get the current date and time from an external server. And we can see that the time is now set correctly. You don't really need to run SNTP each boot because the M3SE's real-time clock calendar chip also has a battery backup that keeps it running when it's powered down. Next, I just want to make a quick point about the VGA monitor. As you can see, I've got a widescreen monitor here, and it's showing the splash screen pretty much in the middle. You can't really tell what the boundaries are. So what I'm going to do is run a command called set VGA to set the background to blue and the border to cyan. And as you can see, it's the cyan border surrounding blue background with white text. You can see the black bars on the side. This particular monitor is smart enough to recognize that it's got a 4:3 image coming in on the VGA connector and insert the black bars automatically. I've seen photos of other customer monitors that don't automatically detect that. And if you have one of those, you'll see that the splash screen and everything else you display on the VGA will be stretched horizontally. Every monitor I've seen has a mode that you can set it in to display a 4:3 ratio picture like this. You might have to search through a menu. It might be a button. But in any case, if you want the original aspect ratio, you need to find out how to do that if you're using a widescreen monitor. That doesn't automatically figure it out. Next, I'll show you the VGA driver. As you can see, the command I'm about to enter is set *do VGA, which routes all data for the display output device to the VGA driver. So I'll hit enter, and as you can see, it says that the driver was installed successfully, and you'll notice that there is no LDOS prompt, unlike when you use the 80 column driver on a Model 1 system expander, which mirrors the CRT display on the VGA display. Things on the Miis work a bit differently. So I'll come over here and show you the VGA monitor, and once the camera adjusts, you can see we've got an LDOS prompt over here now. And if I type in the memory command, you can see that there's now another driver in high memory called VGA. The default output mode for the VGA driver is 80 columns in width. You can see it's 80 columns wide. There's no border, unlike 64 column mode, which we saw earlier. The reason for the 80 column mode is that this was primarily developed for use with the Telnet client that comes with Miis, and if you use that client to connect to Telnet servers out on the internet, they normally expect 80 columns as a minimum for the display device. If you tell them you have 64 columns, things sometimes wrap around and don't really look quite right. And speaking of that, a lot of the commands in LDOS, not a lot, but at least a few of the commands in LDOS assume 64 columns like you have on the CRT display. And I'll show, and if you run those in 80 column mode, sometimes the output can be unintelligible. The two main ones I know of are free, showing the free space on the hard drives. And as you can see, it prints 64 columns and assumes that it had wrapped to the next line and starts printing the next line. And directory is another one, which comes out pretty sloppy looking because it assumes, again, that it wraps to the next line after 64 columns of display, doesn't bother with a carriage return or a line feed. The next thing I'll do is demonstrate the FTP server called FTPD. The L3 is simply a switch to say I want more messages. Right now my PC that I'm going to transfer some files to the TRS-80 from is in another room. This Miis is actually working on a wireless client device, so I've got to shut this down and go in the other room to do the transfer. Here we have the monitor of my PC running Windows Explorer. As you can see, I'm about to type in FTP://Model 3, and I'll do that. And what happens, this takes a moment because I've got floppy drives that it needs to search through. And it brings up a virtual folder for each one of the drives on my Model 3. 0 through 5 are the hard drives, 6 is the floppy drive with the boot floppy in it right now. It doesn't show drive 7 because there's no floppy in that drive. And I'll go into drive 2, which I knew was empty. And here on my desktop I've got a couple of games, Armored Patrol and Galaxy Invasion Plus. And all I have to do is drag and drop. It'll take a moment. And now those are on my Model 3, and we'll go take a look at what happened. And here you can see what happened. You can still see part of the mess from the directory command at the top of the screen because of 80 column mode. Then you can see the FTP server giving some log lines. The first connection was because I did 2 takes in the other room and muffed the first one. Then I connect, store those two games, and then I hit break in here to shut down the FTP server. Now, if at any time you want to switch back and forth between 80 column mode and 64 column mode, the command is set VGA column equals 64 or 80, and you can see we're back in 64 column mode. However, we can't run those games on the VGA display because they directly access the screen memory, which is not how Miis works. On the Miis it worked fine, on the Miis you can't really do that. The VGA display on Miis is primarily intended for text. So we'll come back over here to, well, first let's get out of the VGA display. The way you do that is reset the display output device, and then you stop getting a prompt on the VGA display, and you can come over here to the Model 3, a little tighter, and then what I'm going to do is run Armored Patrol, pick up my joystick, and the sound you hear is because I've got a little speaker device amplifier that I designed a couple of years ago that's hooked up to the cassette port on my Model 3. The M3SE does not supply cassette sound. So this is just a quick demonstration of the joystick. Left, right, forward. Well, I just died. We'll get one. There it is. And we have to reboot the machine to get out of that game. And we can play the other game that we stored over here, Galaxy Invasion Plus.
Galaxy Invasion!
There's a little bit of cassette port speech.
Player one!
Okay, reset again so you can see the joystick port in operation. I've moved into the room with my Model 4P and wired Ethernet just to show you the differences between how M3SE works on a Model 3 4D as opposed to the 4P. And as you can see, I've got the VGA monitor sitting on top of the 4P simply because I don't have enough space for it beside the 4P on the desk in this room. So I'm going to zoom in on the 4P, and hopefully you can see that there are no floppies in the drives. And switch on. There's a blank screen pause where you can hit various keys to control the boot. Then it spins the drives, and then auto boots LDOS. I've moved the VGA monitor a little bit so that you can see it instead of the back of my head as I type on my Model 4P. And I want to show you the Telnet client now. The reason I didn't do this with the Model 3 in the other room is that, as I mentioned, it's on a wireless adapter. And the Telnet client operates in character mode, which means for each keystroke you type, it creates an individual packet which has to be sent over the wireless device to my router across the internet to the server. Server generates a 1 byte data packet in return, which has to go through the same path in the reverse direction, and so you get a bit of lag, and you have to type fairly slowly if you're on wireless. It can be done, but I don't really recommend it. So we'll try Telnet, telehack.com, and there's a warning about it being not a secure connection, and if you agree, you hit enter. And now we're connected to telehack.com in Mountain View, California. I'm in Colorado, so clearly we're using the internet. There are several. Telnet is actually an old-time hacking simulation where you use various methods to hack into other hosts on the network. It's kind of fun, but there are also some games and other things you can do here. Rain, just to show you the cursor positioning potential of the Telnet client. This is supposed to be raindrops falling into a pool, as seen from above, I guess, and you get out of it, you hit Control C. On a Model 3, the control key is Shift down arrow. We can roll some dice. There's a lengthy ASCII art demonstration on here called Star Wars, but as you can see, the Telnet client running on a 4 megahertz Model 4P is not real fast. This should be running much faster than this. And in fact, it's filling up the FIFO and the M3SE. So what you'll see is when there's some text, sometimes it'll flash by a little bit too quickly because the server will send one phrase of text and then pause for a couple of seconds and then send the next phrase. Well, that pause gets lost because of the slowness of the TRS-80. I guess this is kind of timely since I guess the new Star Wars movie is being released today. And here comes the ship being chased. Anyway, once you get your Mies, you can watch all of this at your pleasure. To get out of this, as I showed you before with the rain demonstration, normally you'd hit Control C, but if I hit that now, which I just did, you'll notice it doesn't instantly get me back to the prompt. That's because the FIFO, the receive FIFO on the Mies, the Mies is completely full, and it will take, I would guess, maybe 20-30 seconds to actually stop. So in case, what I can do is hit break, which goes back to the Telnet command line, and just quit straight out of Telnet. And now, just for fun, I'll show telnetting to my PC, which is running a Cygwin INET-D server. Same warning, and log in. You can see one of the, well, I messed up my password. One of the advantages to character at a time mode is that the server can decide whether or not to echo a particular character, like my password. And I shouldn't have typed in my login name in uppercase. There, that worked a little better. So there's the Cygwin server. And you can operate your PC remotely in that manner. In this video, I've shown some of the key features of the Model 3 system expander and explained some of its differences from the Model 1 system expander of a few years ago. There's a lot more information on setting up and using the Mies on the website, and I'll put the URL back up in a moment. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy using the Mies.